Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap, and you know what time it is. It's time to review Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, created by From Software, and out now for PS4, PC, and Xbox gaming systems. That's right, Shadows Die Twice is from the Dark Souls makers From Software, Bloodborne creators as well. So what does that mean? Well, it means we are staring down the proverbial samurai sword-shaped shotgun of a title that requires crackerjack timing and amphetamine levels of energy to snicker-snack through all that catalog of killers, creatures, crafty bastards, and sword-wielding samurais bent on putting a dent in your life bar and an end to your existence. Let's see if Sekiro is the next step in the evolution of the Dark Souls games, or is it the digital seppuku of the company itself? As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. They're liars because apparently shadows die about 247 times, giants with teleporting hands, and killing folks via resurrection sickness. Also, sorry about this being late, but the game is long and the code timing was absolutely terrible for this one. Graphics are up first. Now, other than a couple low detail textures which do exist here, Shadows Die Twice does well with what it has when it comes to offering a new world via architecture combined with solid art design, and even smaller, less instantly noticed systems like the particle systems for the weapon impacts, or in most cases, your head smashing into the rubble of a castle wall after some sword-wielding jackass tried to see if he could throw you through it. But graphically, each location differentiates itself from the last one, and the texture work, the color, the detail are all a step above From Software's last titles, as well they should be. But what's so cool here is how they meld them together. In 1 hour section, you might be exploring the subterranean nesting grounds of poison-spitting lizards, then flitting around snowy ravines, and then fighting through creepy-ass rice fields where the workers seem to be there just because they have no idea what else they should be doing. Character design is also very well done, from phantom warriors bashing through walls to grab you, to undead busting out of the grounds to trap you, ghosts flickering into and out of existence. Environmentally, there's also some good effects here with huge fires, snow blowing down off peaks, and even the dust from a tree branch when you land on it that flits down behind you as you swing onto those spots. I really did like those elements. Shadows Die Twice is at its best when all of those bits are working hand in hand to offer you an expedition into danger, unlike most other games. But let's talk about the animation, because this is a From Software game, and most people are gonna want to know, is the animation hijinks of the past games rearing their ugly head here in Sekiro, where enemies will just power through whatever they're doing just because you didn't play the way the game absolutely demanded, and it doesn't feel as organic to you. Yes. The number of times you're going to see a giant do a fucking double leg flying kick like Marty Jannetty and then reverse midair as you roll past him, then continue on with all that forward momentum like he's outfitted with the entire Matrix and you just have the friggin' useless deja vu causing cat. It's endless. Over the extended period of the time of the game, this does become more of just a slight nuisance than a noticeable problem because it's only on some enemies. I'm looking at you, Giant, and some of the last main bosses. This is all born from the fact that the developer wants you to experiment in many ways, but when in combat, that's going to take a back seat to push a particular combat tactic onto you, which they have chosen. It's not something Dark Souls fans are going to be unaccustomed to, but somebody new to this may actually notice those things. Hopefully, we will see that patched because it does seem fixable. The opposite to those points is that most of the animations are really good. The hair on the giant swishing around, his highly detailed look of anguish as you perform mid-battle LASIK surgery on him by plunging a 6-foot giant kebab maker through one of his eyes is awesome. Every boss, every character has a series of really beautiful animated moves that, honestly, I would like to see other companies start to copy. Very cool animations, and not something that I think should be ignored or minimalized despite some of the issues here. What's really crazy is how they create the atmosphere, like standing on a battlefield after taking on the first boss and dead horses and bonfires and the last vestiges of bodies waiting for the buzzards to feast and realizing, damn, I could have found like 3 other ways to get to this location, and the hard work that kind of tactile level design offers. It's a literal 3D puzzle, allowing for this sense of verticality without sacrificing the free-flowing movement or the danger that you may face if you decide to step into combat at any one time. Now, when it comes to performance, the console versions and the PC version. On the consoles, the game uses a very well-rounded anti-aliasing solution, which does help all the versions look better than the Dark Souls games in the past. The PS4 Pro and the Xbox X premium consoles output at 4K, but neither appear to be native, though just barely missing that. The Pro does have a couple slight differences, at least it looks like, in some of the effects, as do the base consoles from one another. But the big surprise, I have to say, to me was the PS4 and the normal Xbox. Even though the original Xbox is actually at only 900p and the original PS4 is at the more expected 1080p, both benefit from that temporal anti-aliasing, and thankfully that's really started to make its way onto consoles. That means shimmering on far-off aliased objects is almost non-existent here. But when it comes to performance, this is probably why we are getting that, because they all stay above 30 FPS for the most part. None of them seem to be close, though, at all to sticking at 60, and in fact vacillate wildly between them. Now on the PC, I can only speak for myself and say I didn't have these issues, but I have seen some people on online forums having various problems, and I'll mention some of those. I didn't run into any. For example, 1080p 60 FPS on a 1070 and a current i7 was completely doable and probably would have been possible on a 1060. 4K 60 FPS was only really possible, and above that, of course, with the 2080 Ti. However, lots of users with G-Sync are reporting various issues with stuttering and other problems, and the game doesn't seem to support ultra-wide without a hack right now. Now, when I said you could have possibly went above 60 on a 2080 Ti, I mentioned that because sadly the PC version is locked to 60 FPS. Shadows Die Twice usually looks very good. It has a solid, not inspiring number of options you can mess around with, and performance on the PC, for me at least, is about where I would expect, especially if you remove that FPS lock. Like I said, the game looks good, make no mistake, but it does miss a couple softballs along the way that sort of surprised me. That brings us to sound, music, and voice.
Rats with me.
What?
Rats have snuck into Ashina, scurrying about like they own the place.
And this time we're going to do voice first. So while the game has a number of voice choices, I have to say I was surprised how good, for the most part, the English voiceovers actually were. And for those who want to play it that way, they absolutely can without missing much when it comes to delivery. This is aided by solid voice work, usually, as well as a game that isn't known for 20-minute speeches, but instead for a more mysterious tone that isn't really heavy on exposition. One highlight has to be a particular boss who enters the battlefield yelling who he is and what he's going to end up doing to you. Since he's a boss, you may end up facing him a number of times before beating him, but there's something just awe-inspiring about his charge into battle and his loud call to arms as he did it. Even though your time is spent trying to see if you can debone him like a friggin' fish, that moment still imparted some information about the character, which I really enjoyed. And that'll bring us to music. So this was surprisingly more original than I thought it might have been. I thought it was going to sway more towards the sweeping orchestral pieces of their prior games, with maybe just a little bit of Asian flavor to it. But instead, what you get here is a surprising mix of dire solitary moments in the soundtrack, with nothing but a small sample of stringed instruments and some bells, with it kicking up during the battle scenes to these larger focus pieces that come thundering out during boss battles. Yuki Kitamura chose more martial-like elements, I would say, which fit the world's militant themes, and then at times it lightens them up with a bit of original Japanese flutes or a large Japanese drum thundering in some background track. It's a really good job all around, and less structured tonally. There's almost a wild feeling to some of the musical bits. It fits perfectly with the game, especially one that lets you go anywhere you want at your own peril, and the music does what it should, which is elevate the feeling of the environment while bringing certain character themes to the front when needed. I really like the music, despite the fact that maybe I wouldn't listen to it outside the game. Sound. This is pretty good. It does at times favor a bit of that high end and more cartoonish elements when swords clash or when particular battlefield events happen, but it still works really well, and due to the tremendous timing required against some of the enemies, the sound of a weapon swinging or an enemy grunt informs you of your need to parry, dodge, or leap, where other games miss that middle ground. In fact, in one battle in particular, I was facing off against two groups, and I'd accidentally brought together a third one, and hearing the wild swing of a giant's hammer actually alerted me countless times in that battle to block when he was out of camera sight, and that's what good sound should do. Overall, it does it really well. One special bit that's highly noticeable is the excellent feel to the caverns and open underground tombs that can start to confuse you in battle due to the echoes occurring around you. This works really well to define each location as distinct. With those out of the way, we're at gameplay and a bit about the story. Sekiro tells the tale of, well, Sekiro, a shinobi, in a story featuring kidnappings, betrayal, resurrection, amputation, both yourself and a long line of dead foes you're going to leave in your wake, as well as various shades of gray that exist in the world's clans and family structures as you try to figure out exactly what has caused your land to fall into chaos. Shadows Die Twice removes the character creation elements and heavy equipment management of some of the prior games from this developer, and instead focuses on your growth as a shinobi, picking up both replacement arms for the one that gets severed during a fight, as well as picking up combat moves you can perform both freely as well as at a cost for some of the items you grab from around the game world. Its focus on one weapon as well as some side abilities may actually disappoint those who love variety, but we're going to discuss why I think that might not be the case with Sekiro here in a second. First up, you start the game rather weak, learning both in battle as well as via a trainer that you can use at your starting location, that the game has really changed up the From format a bit, hinging far more on deflecting attacks as well as skilled and timed jumps and stuns versus just roll dodging like so many other games. You also have the ability to grapple onto objects in the game world like trees, roofs, walls, and enemies' faces and skirt around the world, adding a sense of freedom that's beyond even Bloodborne's more aggressive stylings. You can also upgrade that arm with a series of attachments that can throw enemies around the world with whirling fan blades, launch fire into their faces, have an axe to break shields, or even send out ninja stars at almost supersonic speed. And lastly, you have a series of combat arts, like creating a bloody mist out of your last enemy to cloud opponents' vision, controlling enemies like some kind of puppet, or sliding into stealth and doing high sword damage attacks both in the air and on the ground. This means that every engagement really does feel unique, as a dodge is no longer the sometimes misused get-out-of-jail-free card we've seen in games, while mobility is heightened to an incredible degree when it comes to usefulness as well as timing. Because here, deflecting attacks takes crackerjack timing, as enemies may leap in and swing once, leap in and hit you with 3-hit combos, a low sweep that requires you to leap over it, or incredibly fast 7-hit combos, all requiring you to defend perfectly in time with the attacks. Otherwise, your posture gauge goes down, or in the cases of sweep attacks, you get hit for high amounts of damage and usually stunned or knocked down. The posture gauge basically slowly builds up as enemies smash on you, and if you're hurt, it builds up even faster. Once it does, then the enemies can blast right through your defenses, and in 1 or 2 hits, you are on the wrong side of the pearly gates trying to figure out why you're the first at the party. Luckily, enemies face the exact same issue, including bosses. This requires you as the player to use the sound effects as well as the visual cues to guess on what they're going to do, while 5 dudes surround you and try to see if they can cut you open and use your intestines as a friggin' jump rope. And this changes it up a little bit, because that unique clash of sword-on-sword moments of a single enemy aren't always what they seem to be, even if you just visited him a second ago, because maybe you haven't let your gauge raise up from a prior attack, and even a single mistake against a lowly dude stand and watch over a pile of shields is going to end up getting you killed. While multiple enemy engagements require deft timing, leaping, dodging, deflecting, all the while also trying to not get shot in the back by ranged enemies, eaten by dogs, smashed by giants, poisoned by lizards, ghosted by ghosts, or lit on fire or falling off cliffs. I think the system actually works for the most part, and sure, the FPS on the consoles being variable can screw up the timing a bit, but overall the game is actually more lenient with the timing than I thought it would be, and instead focuses on the mistakes that you make under a heavy onslaught by misreading an opponent and that almost rock, paper, scissors kind of decision you have to make. At least here you can make a visible dent in them and see that result. Because when enemies reach 0 in their gauge, they become open to fairly brazen attacks for a moment, and not able to really defend themselves either, and hammering a sword into the armored dome of some ghost boss who thinks he still needs to wear armor even though he is, a ghost. And this situational accomplishment is meted out because some of the enemies just don't take much posture damage at all, indicating they're skilled in deflecting attacks, which means you need to slip in there and throw some jabs, in this case replacing boxing gloves with your trusty katana, and do some vitality damage, which allows for you to cave in their defenses and then hopefully their faces. Stealth, though, to me is the secret sauce here. It absolutely works. Sneaking through a patch of very fortunately planted crabgrass allows for you to take out enemies in what has to be the loudest but also for some reason silent attack in the world, with you leap grabbing down, gutting them, cutting their necks, or otherwise dispatching them and disappearing back into the shadows, only to do it again and again and again, if you can. What's nice is if enemies see you, they lose track of you over time, so stealth can be used to whittle away at locations where enemies just seem too thick to really jump into the middle of. Most sub-bosses have some kind of opening, allowing for one stealth attack prior to engaging if you're sneaky, and that does an entire health bar worth of damage, with many of them having 2 health bars. This can be the difference between taking down an enemy in a couple minutes, or a chip damage accrual war, where it feels like you're killing somebody by flicking pennies at them incredibly fast and hoping the other person gives up because they're allergic to copper. No matter how good you are, no matter if you've been a ninja since before Shinobi graced the Master System, you're still going to end up dying at some point in this game. But as you kill, you gain experience that you can turn into at checkpoints. If you end up killing enough enemies, that also gets you a resurrection ability, meaning you can start the battle off right there, albeit usually with about half your health and most of the time getting treated like you're the last soccer ball in summer tryouts. However, when you die here, the world dies with you, which, while weird and more of a narrative slant than really anything game-provoking, it's unique when you find an NPC who is hanging out in some location suddenly stricken with some weird disease and you finding out that you're causing them to get sicker each time you die. You will get better though. In fact, you're going to have to. And as you do, and as you kill enemies and explore, you're going to find all manner of items, from prayer beads dropped by bosses that allow for you to raise the two main attributes you have, which is vitality and attack power, or various candies that cause you to take less damage or do more damage to enemies' guards. This is a pretty robust item system overall, with a series of merchants around the locations allowing for you to sell what you don't want and buy what you need, including items for upgrading your arm. Now, all this wouldn't matter at all if the game didn't control well. For the most part, Sekiro responds like you would expect. I say for the most part because sometimes he feels deathly afraid of breaking a friggin' fingernail, and the ability to grab onto ledges failed more than once. Other than that, since you can pause the game and switch items into and out of your quick use spots, as well as assign all the buttons to others if you want, there doesn't feel like there's as much juggling as was needed in this developer's prior titles. While I feel like most of the combat is fair, the AI itself isn't the greatest, and at times you will be slaughtering entire armies of low-level lackeys all just trying to pay their mortgage by working for the local leaders, and then the leaders walk over their bodies without noticing anybody's there. It can really feel a bit artificial because these are supposed to be some of the best warriors around. And this is even more noticeable, especially when you come off some amazing mountainside traversal, sneaking along ravines and shimming across cracks on the side of a castle, only to see 5 enemies just standing there doing absolutely nothing. Many of them facing inwards, like they think the best way to guard from an attack is to soak up damage on their asses first. Just when you notice something like that, you have 2 or 3 other excellent engagements, and it's enjoyably difficult at times, which I like. I wouldn't say the story's a knockout of the park, though, that's for sure. It did keep me interested, and the promise of a couple different endings always works to engage the player a bit, especially later game when you start making some choices that don't happen at all really in the first, say, 10 or 20 hours. The game really does change halfway through. And speaking of hours, you're looking at about 45, and then you have some give and take depending on the difficulty that you find from the title. And I'm sure there'll be people coming in at less who are more highly skilled or have watched a couple thousand YouTube videos before playing the game. All of this, when it comes to playing the game and enjoying it, is about fun factor. So let's get this out of the way. Sekiro does carry some trappings from the Dark Souls games into it, as well as Bloodborne. It's a new world, though, and due to that, most of the time I actually enjoyed it in a unique and different way. Much of it was due to the blend of changes in this dogmatic regime that we have of roll, strike kind of combat to something a bit more varied. A world that's fun to explore, and systems within systems to slightly alter the normal gameplay loop, as well as a stealth system that's powerful and a movement system varied enough to add true verticality and a 3-dimensional required thinking to all of that as a mix. Also, I loved most of the normal enemies, which is insanely rare for me. While their placement wasn't always perfect, nor their AI, their deadliness and the attention required to defeat them really spoke to me when it could have been just a sort of showed up, been there, done that kind of title. But the atmosphere may cause more people to jump in, which can only be considered a good thing, even if it's sort of like jumping into a swimming pool filled with razor blades and blenders on full speed at first. The fun here, though, is to embrace that and go with it instead of sanding off the edges to make that experience for every single person to enjoy. That's not what it's about. As you know, I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being replaced by deep sale on PC if that is the end rating. And this is definitely a buy. Despite some of those issues that I in particular do not like, I get why people are going to love this. If you're a Bloodborne fan, the constant focus on both aggression and defense with split second to notice that change and have to make a choice is devastatingly good. If you're a Dark Souls fan and like difficult games, this is also probably your bag. But if you're attached to character creation, varied builds, and so forth, this may not be for you. Its variation is how you handle the multitude of enemies and their lethality measured against your current posture gauges level, your experience points you're carrying, and if you, of course, have resurrection. There are some differences here, and I get it. I had a good time with it, despite the issues I did end up having. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the review. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. You can check out Facebook and Twitter and Twitch. I'm in all those places. The links are all in the description. Or you can become a patron on the Patreon website and continue to help me give you guys reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And as always, I buy a copy of every single game I review, even if the developer gives me a code. We also have an amazing Discord community. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.